What is up, my ninjas? I am Strident and I am back with another video. This time I wanted to talk about Young Justice. It's finished, it's done. They finally pulled the plug on the series. And I'm not happy about it, but I kind of want to talk about what was good and what was bad. And, you know, some of the other crap that probably led to this decision. For those of you who don't know, Young Justice is a TV series that was based on a comic from the 90s, in which all of the quote-unquote sidekicks of many of the, you know, DC's headlining heroes and not-so-headlining heroes kind of got together and wanted to make a name for themselves. They wanted to prove to the League, to their older analogs that, or their mentors, I guess you should say, they wanted to prove that they were worthy of, you know, one day being in the League. You know, they're just as important as the League is. The TV series kind of takes that in a similar direction, but what they added is that Batman decides to use them as a Black Ops, you know, special missions team. Whatever the League can't do, or stuff that he's too busy to do, or just, you know, doesn't seem feasible at the time, Batman will have the team do it. In the comics, it was Tim Drake's vision, essentially. And Tim Drake was the third Robin, who, for whatever reason, DC has been shitting on in recent years, and I really fucking hate that because he's my favorite Robin. He's actually my favorite supporting character of the Bat family. I like him better than even Dick Grayson. Not to say that Dick Grayson isn't a cool character, but I think that seeing Tim mature versus seeing Dick mature was more interesting. Anyway, the first season was really cool because you got to see the team kind of start out as just regular, you know, they seemed like teens who had a vision, and then as shit started hitting the fan more, you see them kind of mature, and you see them actually start acting like a team. You also see their training, and then you see them slowly come into their own. Their missions varied from you watching as they fight off, I want to say, various aliens and you know, threats to the lives of delegates from other countries, assassination attempts. You see them fight a couple well-known villains like Bane, all the way up to the huge end game where the League was taken control of. You know, their bodies were taken over and used against, you know, their own will against their friends and, you know, whatever. And the kids had to fight them, pretty much, you know, take them over, or not take them over, but take them down if they could, hold their own against them, if you will. They did that, saved the League, proved their worth, and earned themselves, you know, the respect of their mentors. Season 2, it takes place, I want to say, about 7 years later. They pulled that huge jump. So your characters were really, the ones that were youngest are older. You're seeing Robin is now Nightwing. He kind of takes on Batman's role as he's not the mentor, but he's kind of their foreman. He shows up and he's just like, this is what we're going to do. You're going to go here, you're going to go here, and you're going to go here. And you hardly really see him in action. In the first couple episodes, you see him a couple times, but towards the middle of the series, you don't really see him in action. He just shows up, helps them figure shit out, goes on about his business. The last couple episodes, you see him actually in battle with them. It was kind of nice to see this change, because with Robin becoming Nightwing, you got to see Tim Drake as Robin. You also got to see the introduction of Batgirl, Wonder Girl, you know, several other characters that you hadn't seen that were part of the Young Justice team in the comic book incarnation. You got to see them in some way, shape, or form as part of the cartoon incarnation. And the plots got really serious, and there was a lot of double crossing. It felt like Gargoyles almost, with all the intricate relationships and the people playing each other and all that stuff, and it was worth watching. Some people said it got convoluted, and I think if you were paying attention, it was not convoluted. You could understand easily. We get to see Cassie, Sam's Mark, Wonder Girl. She's now a part of the team. You get to see Batgirl and Tim Drake running around doing cool shit. And Aqualad is kind of shown off as a villain. So, to make a long story short, which was the goal, there is a ploy to kind of weed out or bring out into the forefront the people responsible for some of the issues going on in this universe at the time. And certain people are undercover, and things are not what they appear to be. But only a handful of characters are aware of this. One of the characters that's aware is no longer on the team, and that's Wally, who was Kid Flash from the original season. You start learning about this alien invasion and the people that were responsible for it. And there's a whole lot of how the media deals with heroes and how the media deals with situations and how there's approval ratings and shit like that, and how the heroes are being outed kind of to the world at large. And this creates tension with the heroes and the people who they're trying to save. And then, aliens that show up who are actually the villains, they get props and people are liking them because of the way everything is being presented. You have that douchebag G. Gordon Godfrey, which I think is fucking hilarious that they did that, as opposed to J. Jonah Jameson. But, it's funny. You have him kind of slandering every time something happens. He gets on his soapbox and he slanders, one of the two sides. Mostly he doesn't like the League because of the aliens that are part of it. He doesn't trust them. And anyway, long story short with this is Blue Beetle turns into one of the focal points of the series because of something he may have the potential to do in one of the potential futures. And it's the future that Impulse comes from. And then that in itself turns into a whole nother thing, and everything just seems to branch off into these different things, and it was leading towards this huge showdown between the aliens known as the Reach, who are the ones that are secretly invading us, or were secretly invading us under the guise of friendship, and the actual team, the Young Justice main characters. Oh man, it was good. The setups were really good. I didn't feel like it was convoluted. I didn't feel like, and there is a lot going on, don't get me wrong, but it didn't feel convoluted because you understood where people stood from, issue to issue. You know what I'm saying? From one episode to the next, you knew, Aqualad was cool with these people, but he wasn't cool with these people. Or, these two villains don't get along, so anytime they're together, there's going to be beef or friction or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like, you understood very clearly who was doing what and why they did it. Motivations, their reasoning behind their motivations, the things that would be triggers to set them off. You understand this shit, like, completely. So, I've watched other reviews where people said that the series was convoluted and, they hated the fact that there were so many characters that it took away from, the main 7 original characters. And, I agree. It did take away from them. You didn't get as much time spent on them, but it didn't cheapen them and it didn't make them less interesting characters because we already know them and we know how they're going to react to stuff. And when they tell you, Wally West doesn't like the superhero game anymore. Okay, fine. I believe that. He found a girl of his dreams and he wants to stay with her. It kind of makes sense. When she decides not to chill with him and stay and she joins the team and, quote unquote gets killed, you kind of understand how he feels. You know what I mean? So I don't have any complaints with how they were handled as characters. My complaints come with the fact that Warner Brothers seems not to have the good graces to kind of push a good show, They've been mistreating a lot of their properties, especially their DC stuff. I mean, how often did you see commercials on regular television for The Dark Knight Returns Part 1 and 2? Both movies were better than The Dark Knight Rises, but you saw Dark Knight Rises every fucking where, but you didn't see anything about the adaptation, the animated adaptation of the film that Nolan cites as his inspiration for the Dark Knight trilogy. I mean, how does that make sense? You know what I mean? You every time a DC show shows up on Cartoon Network, it gets canned halfway through the season, or halfway through whatever the cycle was that was decided on. Somehow, somewhere in there, they change it and then they cut it short. We've seen that with Batman. We've seen that with Batman Beyond. We've seen that with Justice League. We've seen it Justice League Unlimited. It keeps happening and happening and happening. The only show I'm not sure if that was the case was Brave and the Bold. But, you need the toy line that went with Young Justice is an example of this. You need the company to be behind their product. You know what I mean? Stand behind it. Put that shit out there. We should see posters in the subway. You should see freaking ads for the cartoon on YouTube. You should see it everywhere because the company has money. Instead of putting all their money in shitty films or, okay films, put their money where you're supreme. As far as animation goes, 2D animation, no one else in the US is competing with Warner Brothers Animation, especially the DC animated universe. No one. Marvel is trying, but they're sending all their shit to Japan. So it doesn't even count when you compare it because it's anime versus American animation. It's two different things. So, I'm kind of frustrated at the fact that this is the treatment that such quality animation is getting from the people, the country of origin. It doesn't make sense. Okay, so something that I've been wanting to tackle for a while, a subject, is the subject of the popularity of these particular types of shows, or DC Comics supporters and fans not keeping these series and animations going. Now, I've been on so many sites, including Cartoon Network sites and fan sites for DC Comics characters in whatever form. Most of the time, it's all their forms. And I've been on sites about comics and TV shows, and I keep hearing that not enough people are watching these shows. Then I go on the internet and I see tons and tons of people that like the show on Facebook, tons and tons of people talking about the show on various, websites, message boards, whatever, fan sites. And I'm like, where are they getting this information from? More and more I'm seeing that all these companies are having extremely unrealistic expectations for anything that they put out, Instead of acknowledging the fan base, finding out exactly how big or how small that fan base is, and then trying to grow it from there, they put out a random number that may or may not far surpass the amount of people who are interested in this shit in the first place. And then they say that's the number we have to hit in order for this thing to be deemed a success. So then if they hit just under it by maybe, a couple thousand, 100,000 people, then it's considered a failure. I don't understand, and I don't see how that works, Young Justice was extremely popular. There's tons of people who know that this was based on a comic from back in the day. There's people who read the comic. I've talked to a lot of people who've read the comic. And there's people who watch the show who didn't read the comic but like those characters now, and they've gone back to read those comics. I don't understand how the execs at DC don't see how a show like this helps create a fan base. And if they're younger, that means they'll be reading DC Comics, provided the material is good. They'll be reading DC Comics for years to come. The cool thing about comics is that if you don't like what's out right now, you could spend a lifetime reading the shit that came 20 years, 30 years, 60 years before. You know what I'm saying? They're books. So you would still buy those books from comic book stores. In return, you'd be paying DC Comics to continue doing what they do. How is it that I understand this and they don't? How is it that as many people as you've heard complain about, the cancellation of Young Justice just on YouTube, The amount of people whose feelings were hurt because this show that they liked with characters who they didn't know about until the show, and that they loved the way they were introduced and handled so much so that they want to follow these characters. Now they don't get to watch that shit anymore, you know? They get those half-assed comics that exist. And some of them might be well written, but overall, I always shy away from the comic version of a TV show because they're going to do things way more complex than what's on the show, and then it becomes its own thing, and it's not necessarily what, you know, what it started out to as. But you know, all those new fans who jumped on, who never really had maybe a female character that they really liked, who now they have one, or they didn't really like couples in comics, and then now they like the couples that are in this show. You know, just for whatever number of reasons that you know could possibly draw you to something, they have it now, and DC is literally shitting on those people by giving us Teen Titans Go. Really? I remember years ago we wanted more Teen Titans, like the regular Teen Titans, because the show got really good after a while. Why can't you give us that? Instead, you give us this shit because Adventure Time is doing good? Like, come on now. Every show, and this is something the entertainment industry has done so fucking much that it pisses me off. First, you saw it with Batman. We got Batman Begins, and then everybody was like, everything has to be real and gritty, even if that's not the approach that was intended for said property. Everything must be an origin story. Everything must be a prequel. Everything must be like the last thing that made us money. No! Theoretically, that makes sense from a business standpoint because you want to continue trends that brought you in your revenue. It's obvious, right? But it doesn't mean that you stay on one wavelength the whole time. No, you can always try different things with similar aspects. I'm not saying don't give Teen Titans Go to anyone because no one will watch it. No, there's people who like shit that looks like that, and they like that kind of humor, and there's little kids. Little kids like those kind of shows. So put that on. Put it on fucking Disney XD or some shit. Or put it on a block with Adventure Time and shit like that. Don't alienate us, the fans who've been with DC since we were little kids, before they started doing all the bullshit they're doing now, when we only had, like, the fucking Adam West Batman show, or Batman the Animated Series, or Superman the Animated Series, or there's even, you know, cats that grew up with Justice League Unlimited and the first Justice League show, or Super Friends if you take it really far back. But don't alienate us because you think that you found yourself a new demographic. Those kids realistically, kids are not watching cartoons like they used to. I mean, do you see the bullshit on Cartoon Network? Every show looks the same. And it's so bad that they spend so much time playing marathons of the same shit. The other day, me and my family went to Georgia for a wedding. And so we stayed up in a hotel. And they had Cartoon Network as one of the channels we could just watch. We didn't have to pay for or whatever. So my son, the older son, of course, turns on Cartoon Network and turns into a zombie. But he watched Johnny Test for like fucking, I don't know, like 2 hours. I'm like, why is there a 2-hour block of Johnny Test? And I'm exaggerating, but it was like 4 or 5, you know, helpings back to back to back to back. And you know, the episodes of Johnny Test are short within the half-hour time slot. So you got several episodes within that one time slot, and then they started over and did more. And I'm sitting here like, this shit is not even that funny. It's not even that interesting, yet we've got this shit going on for about an hour. That's stupid. Years ago, they did the same shit with Ed, Edd and Eddy. And I'm not saying no one can like it. Don't get me wrong. But what I'm saying is you waste a whole block by putting the same thing 50 times, you know what I'm saying? When you could space it out, create a series of time. Like when I was a kid, channels that I watched, like Channel 5 had a time period that was only Superman and Batman. Or the WB, I'm sorry. It was only Superman and Batman, the animated series. Then they combined that and you had the Batman Superman Adventures. That was cool. Boomerang has a time period that's all DC shit. It's Batman the Animated Series, Justice League Unlimited, Brave and the Bold. It's like all this shit. Super Friends even pops up in there sometimes. And it's like, if Boomerang can do this and it's owned by the same people, why can't Cartoon Network do it? Instead of all these generic, formulaic, like wannabe trendy cartoons that are poorly drawn and then kind of feel like they're written by the same people who write Adventure Time, or they write the knockoffs of Adventure Time, you know? Because I'm not going to lie, Adventure Time is funny, but it can't be the be-all, end-all. And, you know, there is an audience for the DC animated universe. I mean, the DC animated universe, in my opinion, overall, with the exception of less than a handful of movies and stories, whatever, it's better than the comic universe. They make sense of all this shit that the comics just keep on dragging out so that you keep reading, so that you can eventually, you know, 10 years down the road after they've made a fucking gaggle of money, then it'll make sense to you. Whereas when you watch these movies, because they're trimming the fat, because it's presented to you in, you know, about an hour or two, they make the shit make sense relatively quickly. And when you watch it in conjunction with the last thing you watched, it all piles up and you get a good understanding of how these things actually work. There's no bullshit, you know? Because they can't bullshit you. They need to get you and hold you for all that time. So, I don't know. It bugs me that we can't get proper representation or proper, I shouldn't say representation, but a consistent representation or you know, showing of this kind of material. It's well done. I mean, you look at what Marvel's doing. Marvel is sending their stuff overseas because finally they realize, okay, we should have done what we planned on doing with that X-Men anime in the 90s and the Spider-Man that was proposed. We should have done that years ago. So now they're like, hey, Japan, please animate our stuff for us. And you're getting a bunch of anime coming from, you know, Japan. It seems like they're really going heavy with Iron Man because, you know, of all of the Marvel characters, somehow Iron Man is the most popular. At least in film form. That's what I'm trying to say. And Marvel, you know, you see what they're doing with their live action films. They're like a fucking runaway train. Everything they do is big and it's awesome. And it hits. It just hits. People like these things because instead of trying to be pretentious and trying to make it seem deeper than it really is, they're just giving you escapist flair. You know, you watch Iron Man 1. I know what Iron Man's real origin is. I think personally it would have been more interesting, but people may not be ready for that. So Marvel said, you know, we're going to simplify it and we'll do it like this. It ended up being good. You know, people liked it. I actually liked the first Iron Man better than the second. The second Iron Man had too much shit going on and they tried to like cram too much of Iron Man's history into that 2-hour period. You know, hey, let's just make a new element. What the fuck? He's just gonna go in the basement, start breaking shit, shoot a laser through a hole, and he made a new element, you know? I'm like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. That's pretty stupid. But that's me. You know, a lot of people like that movie. But I think that the first outings for all the Marvel movies kind of proved that you don't need to necessarily latch on to one thing and present that with all your characters, because each Marvel movie had a different feel. They took place in different time periods, different parts of the world, etc., etc. That's what we need with these DC films, and that's what we get with the animated universe. Shit takes place all over the world. You got different groups of characters. You got different styles of storytelling. You got different approaches to being a superhero. You got just about everything you could want from a good cinematic version of these characters. And Warner Brothers is like, not enough people are watching. Yeah, because by the time they get to watch it, you pull the show. Speaking of changes with Warner Brothers, Warner Brothers has a new CEO. And pretty much this new CEO is trying to clean up all the bullshit and all the crap that has been going on at Warner Brothers for the last who knows how many years. I remember reading reports of, you know, these big divisions, which is why every time a new DC movie is you know, or, you know, a good Warner Brothers film, but mostly with the comics movies, every time a new one is greenlit or it's in the pipeline, it gets destroyed because they can't agree on shit, you know? Well, he's supposed to be fixing all that. And I think in the process of fixing these things, he's bringing his own people in, or he's getting rid of the people who can't change, don't want to change, and bringing in people he knows that are, you know, versatile and will work properly with the team, as opposed to slowing up the progress of the team. I don't know if Bruce Timm doesn't get along with, you know, or doesn't agree with this CEO, but he didn't say, Bruce Timm has not said that he's leaving Warner Brothers. He's just leaving his position, his current position as or his previous position as creative director for their animation department. So I don't know, man. It's just weird. I mean, like, I read somewhere else that there's issues with this Justice League movie, and I think it all ties to the same stuff. Now that we have a new CEO, the new CEO might have a different vision for the way things should be working. And, you know, when you really look at it, the fact that everybody wants to kiss one guy's butt because he did good in one area, it doesn't mean you hand over all the keys to everything to him. So, I don't know, maybe we will see Young Justice again down the road, just it won't be in this exact kind of form, you know? I don't know. Maybe this doesn't make any sense, but, you know, I hate to see the series go. So, you know, that's how I feel about the show. I felt it was really well done. I like the art style. I mean, some of the characters were too fucking skinny, but it was different because I had a phase where I was kind of against all these ridiculously bulked up characters. And I felt like, you know, let's trim them down. So a lot of my characters, I do have a handful of characters that are a lot slimmer than what you typically see in superheroes, superhero comics and superhero, you know, shows or whatever. But, you know, I like the show. I like the fact that all the designs, all the costume designs were actually taken into a more tactical direction where you could tell, like, this piece is armor, this piece is tights, or, you know, some kind of mesh or something, or, you know, just, it was like everything was updated, you know, to the umpteenth degree. I mean, just look at Deathstroke. I always had issues with Deathstroke's design and the big ass fireman boots and shit, and I was like, you know, they need to do something about that, because it just doesn't seem logical for someone so skilled to be wearing such restricting heavy clothing, you know. But they did it up. They did it up. Phil Barassa, I think he is the lead designer, character designer, and you know, his designs sometimes are hit and miss, but in general, in Young Justice, he was on top of his game. You know, I dug everything that I saw, even the characters who didn't wear costumes, like Wonder Girl, her wearing that like kind of warm-up gear. I'm like, shit, it works, because, I mean, she probably wouldn't dress like Wonder Woman. If you know Cassie's personality, she wants to achieve the same status, but she doesn't want to be Wonder Woman. Not like that, you know. She wants to be a different kind of Wonder Woman. And then it's in line with the fact that Hawkgirl kind of went through that kind of stage in Justice League Unlimited. So, you know, like I said, design-wise, visuals, it was awesome. Storytelling, it was really well done because you had so much going on, and it all tied into one premise. Even the side stories that felt unrelated, they still had some kind of, you know, some kind of thread that connected them to the main plot. You know, I mentioned the whole thing about the Justice League being on trial because they were framed. That still played into the young, you know, sidekicks or the new team earning the league's respect, because, you know, they end up saving the league from that fate. So, you know, you really got to see a broad scope of what this kind of a team, or what superheroes in, you know, in a global or universal sense, what they would go through. So for those, you know, who said, you know, they didn't get it, I'm sorry. But it's good shit. And because you didn't get it doesn't mean that they did a bad job writing it. No, you just didn't get it. Hopefully we'll get something else, you know, but it just pains me to see that from Batman the Animated Series, well, after Batman the Animated Series, not one of these shows, maybe Brave and the Bold, I think actually had an end, because I do remember Batman saying thank you and good night. But not one of these series since then You know, it's only the Batman series that get a beginning and an end. Oh, Batman Beyond didn't even get an end. They just cut that shit off too so that they could do Justice League. So, you know, it's kind of disrespectful to me in a sense, and disrespectful to the series and the people working on it, that they don't even give them an absolute beginning and end, you know, so that they know what they're working towards and then be like, okay, it's done, you know. Don't let the show go on for 2 years if that's what it is. You know, you want to make room for new stuff. Let it go on for a whole year and then call it a day. You know, I think they need to plan better, and then we'll get better, more quality. Not that we're not already getting quality stuff, but what I'm saying is that the teams that are involved will get a chance to get out their whole thought. And then if they want to move on, they can move on. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I know it's a business. I always have to mention this because you always see people saying shit like, it's a business, so you think they blah, 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 blah. Motherfucker, I know I work in the business. What I'm saying is there needs to be more foresight involved. People need to see all the way down the pipeline and say, this is the expanse of time I want this to take up. These are the resources we're going to use, and we're not going to change it. If they want more, then we make changes. But for now, this is it. So that every season can end as if that's the end of the show, period. As opposed to every season, you find out they want more episodes, so they keep tacking shit on, you know? Let the writers actually write a whole thought from beginning to end. Then we'll have some awesome shit instead of the Lost method where you don't know what the next episode is going to be, because that's what it feels like. You get a season with a good plot, but then right at the end they're told that yes, you got renewed, so they have to write something that would lead into the next plot. And you know, it just, I don't know, different shows handle it differently, but I hope that the next thing will be better thought out so that we can actually, you know, enjoy the whole thought and get all of it all at once. So anyway, let me know what you think as always, because you know my ninjas know what they're talking about for the most part. There are a few of you in there that you're learning, and it's good because it gives us stuff to talk about, because my ninjas teach. That's a good thing. Let me know what you think. Let me know if there's something I missed, which I know you guys have no problem doing. And, you know, just stay tuned for the next video. You know, it's been good talking to you, and I will talk to you later. Peace outside.